There comes a moment, often sudden, sometimes gradual, when the curtain of illusion lifts. The structures you once believed in, the desires you chased, the ambitions you cradled like sacred relics all begin to crumble. It is not a collapse into despair, but a quiet, almost eerie stillness, a void where once there was striving. This is what many call spiritual awakening. Yet ironically, what follows for many is not boundless energy or divine purpose, but a strange absence of motivation, a heavy, unfamiliar stillness. Today we're here to explore why motivation often disappears after spiritual awakening, and why that might not be a problem at all, but a sign you are finally becoming truly alive. Before the awakening, life is a chase, a pursuit of identities, goals, and achievements, all constructed by the mind's idea of who we are supposed to be. You wake each morning with an agenda already whispered into your psyche by the collective dreams of society: succeed, compete, build a name, become someone. The engine behind all of this movement is what we might call the ego. The psychological structure that believes it is separate, that it must prove itself, defend itself, and control its destiny. It is clever, it is terrified of failure, of insignificance, of death. The ego sets the pace of life, and it is always just a little faster than peace can catch up with. This ego doesn't just shape your outer life, it defines your inner sense of worth. If you are productive, if you are praised, if you are winning the game, then you feel good. If not, then a subtle or not so subtle shame arises. Most motivation in modern life is driven by this tension, the pressure to escape this shame and secure a sense of being enough. So you keep running. You set goals that will impress others, chase careers that will make your parents proud or society approve. Accumulate things that signal your value. You aren't moving toward freedom, you are running from the unbearable idea that without all this, you might be nothing. Then the awakening comes. Sometimes like a lightning bolt, sometimes like a slow erosion. But it comes, and with it, the startling, liberating, and often disorienting realization: none of those things ever made you real. The identity you had worked so hard to construct is seen for what it is: a mask, a performance, a defense. The goals you thought were yours are revealed as inherited dreams, absorbed through culture, family, media, survival instinct. In one breath, the scaffolding collapses. You are no longer hypnotized by the voice that says, "If only you achieve this, then you will be whole." That voice is exposed as a trick of the mind, a loop playing in the background, always just out of reach. The moment you see the game, it no longer holds power over you. But with that seeing comes a peculiar emptiness. The fire that once fueled you, the burning need to be seen, to win, to stand above, flickers and dies. This isn't a burnout that sleep can cure, it's the spiritual death of the ego's agenda. Without that agenda, what's left? You wake up and realize there's no urgent reason to push forward. You're no longer interested in running a race you now understand has no real finish line. The rules you once obeyed no longer seem relevant. The prize no longer glitters. This absence of motivation is not a mistake. It is the natural consequence of no longer being willing to betray yourself for an illusion. What looks like a loss of energy is, in truth, the removal of pressure. You are not being pulled in different directions by artificial goals. You are not being chased by fear in the same way. And yet, because the old motivators are gone, the mind panics. It says, "Why can't I get going like before? What's wrong with me?" But there is nothing wrong. You are not malfunctioning, you are deconstructing. You are witnessing the breakdown of the false self's momentum, and what you are left with is silence. Raw, unsettling silence, and in that silence, a deeper part of you begins to stir. A part that doesn't speak in commands or deadlines, but in presence. A part that doesn't care about image or comparison but about truth. That part is not in a hurry. It has no interest in your resume. It's not impressed by metrics or applause. It doesn't need you to be anyone else. It waits quietly, until you are still enough to hear what it has to say. From an early age, we are conditioned to believe that life unfolds like a story. A straight line from birth to success to legacy. We are given maps: graduate, get a job, build a family, rise through the ranks, accumulate wealth, retire comfortably, and perhaps leave something behind that people will remember. This narrative feels safe, almost sacred, and for a time it works. You wake each day with a destination in mind, a future to build toward, a version of yourself waiting just a few steps ahead, always in progress. Motivation is fueled by this story. You move forward to complete the script. You believe there is meaning in arriving, in reaching the next chapter. Every goal, every plan, every self-help mantra is steeped in the idea that life has a track, and you're either on it or falling behind. But when a spiritual awakening occurs, the narrative fractures. The straight line bends, then dissolves altogether. You begin to see that life was never moving forward in the way you imagined. There is no fixed destination. The notion of getting somewhere, becomes laughable, not because there is nowhere to go, but because the obsession with progress itself is seen as a kind of trance. You're not disillusioned because something went wrong. You're disillusioned because the illusion itself has finally been exposed. The idea that meaning lies somewhere out ahead, waiting for you in a better version of yourself, begins to collapse under the weight of truth. And with that collapse, motivation, at least in the form you once knew it, begins to evaporate, no longer held together by timelines and goals. You enter a strange, unfamiliar space. The ambition that once felt like fire now feels like smoke, dispersing in your hands. The structured path that once gave you purpose now seems artificial, even absurd. Without the tension of the future pulling you forward, your mind panics. It says, I'm stuck. But you're not stuck. You've simply stepped off the conveyor belt of linear meaning. What you're experiencing is not stagnation. It's presence. But presence experienced through a nervous system that was trained to equate stillness with failure. Without a future to chase, the mind flails. It tries to invent new projects, new missions, new ways to matter. But your soul doesn't move like anymore in this place. Time begins to feel different. Some days expand endlessly, others collapse into silence. You are no longer measuring yourself by productivity or progress. You are simply here, and here doesn't offer the same rewards as next. There is no gold star for being, no medal for inner peace. And so, the ego, losing its grip, whispers doubts. It says, without drive, who are you? It says, if you're not climbing, you must be falling. But these voices belong to the old system. They belong to the architecture of a mind built on scarcity and separation. What feels like apathy is actually deconstruction. What feels like loss is actually the stripping away of what was never truly you. As the linear story dissolves, a different kind of movement becomes possible. Not forward, but inward, not ambition but depth, not becoming but unbecoming. You start to feel drawn not to achievements but to truth, to simplicity, to what is honest in this very moment. Life ceases to be about milestones and begins to reveal itself as moments. Moments that do not progress but unfold. The craving for momentum is replaced by the ability to sit inside stillness without needing to escape it. And this stillness is not empty, it is alive. But the aliveness it carries cannot be measured, monetized, or explained to a world that worships progress. It can only be felt by the one who has ceased to chase illusions. You begin to understand that the motivation you've lost was tied to a dream you no longer believe in. The dream of someday, of more, of finally enough. And in its place something quieter begins to emerge. Something that doesn't call itself motivation, but feels like truth, unfolding without force, without pressure, without the need to arrive anywhere but here. Before the awakening, the world presents itself as a marketplace of rewards. Everything is transactional. Effort brings recognition, sacrifice brings success, performance brings belonging. You are taught to chase after symbols of value, not because they satisfy something deep and true within you, but because they signal to others, and to yourself, that you are doing life correctly. From childhood you are rewarded for good grades, good behavior, achievements that fit within an approved mold. This conditioning is subtle but relentless. Over time you begin to believe that happiness is a reward you earn, not a state of being you return to. You tie your worth to outcomes, not awareness. You pursue what sparkles in the eyes of others, not what stirs in the depths of your own being. You believe that if you work hard enough, shine bright enough, gain enough approval, then you will feel at peace. But peace never comes that way. It only moves further out, just beyond the next milestone, and when you reach that one, other waits after spiritual awakening. These external rewards, titles, wealth, validation, begin to feel hollow. It's not that you suddenly reject them with anger. It's that you look at them and feel nothing. The excitement you once felt about being admired or promoted or envied fades. The goals you once called dreams now feel like costumes you were given to wear in a play you never chose to audition for. There is a subtle but powerful disinterest that arises, not apathy, not depression, but a loss of belief in the old incentives. The praise that once made you feel like you mattered now sounds empty. The accomplishments you once believed would make you whole reveal themselves as distractions from the deeper work you didn't know you were avoiding. This is where the mind begins to panic. Because the rewards no longer move you, but the deeper compass has not yet fully awakened. You feel suspended. The world keeps shouting its offers, promotions, applause, status, visibility. But none of them reach the part of you that has now opened. That part isn't interested in validation, it only responds to authenticity. And because society is built to reward performance, not presence, this inner shift can feel like being cut off from the very systems that once held your identity together. You don't want what they offer anymore. But you're not yet sure what you do want. The gap between those two spaces can feel like a vast, unsettling emptiness. In this emptiness, it's easy to mistake disillusionment for dysfunction. You wonder why nothing excites you. You ask why you're no longer inspired to climb the ladder, build the brand, expand the empire. You may even question your sanity, because the metrics you once used to measure your aliveness, energy, ambition, goals, no longer apply. But what you're experiencing is not a failure of motivation, it's the collapse of artificial motivation. The kind built on fear, insecurity, and comparison. The kind that pushes you because you're afraid of being left behind. That engine has run out of fuel because you no longer believe the journey it powers leads to truth in this space. Real desire has not yet arrived. You are standing in the ash of old pursuits, waiting for something you cannot name. The ego wants to fill the space, to chase a new goal, to find a new identity. But the soul waits, and in the waiting something begins to take shape, not another shiny reward but a deeper call. Not something that excites the mind, but something that resonates in the bones. This desire is quieter, subtler, almost invisible at first. It does not demand attention. It whispers in moments of stillness, in glimpses of beauty, in moments of connection that are too simple for the ego to care about. It is not interested in applause. It seeks alignment. This is where the path begins to change. You no longer ask what will make me important, but instead, what is real for me now? And in asking that question, the first seeds of authentic movement begin to sprout. You are no longer driven by what glitters. You are drawn by what is honest, and that draw, though quieter, is infinitely more powerful than anything the old world could offer. What most people call lack of motivation after awakening is not laziness or failure. It is a quiet and necessary unraveling that the modern mind was never taught to understand. In the world before awakening, speed is a virtue and stillness is a threat. You are conditioned to believe that the faster you move, the more you accomplish, the more valuable you are. Productivity is treated like morality. You are praised for doing, rarely for being. So you internalize the idea that your worth is tied to how much you achieve, how often you hustle, how busy your schedule looks. In this world, rest is allowed only as a means to recover from more work, not as a sacred state in itself. Integration is never taught. You are always moving toward the next thing before the last thing has even settled inside you. But spiritual awakening is not a moment. It is a disruption. A collapse of the identity you once thought was you. It is not clean or linear. It is the dissolving of who you were without the immediate arrival of who you are becoming. Something deep inside cracks open, and what spills out cannot be managed by to-do lists or fixed by positive affirmations. It is raw, alive, unfinished. And this inner earthquake does not ask you to accelerate. It asks you to stop. To breathe, to feel. But that request runs counter to everything you've been trained to do. So instead of honoring the stillness, you interpret it as something being wrong. You say, I can't seem to get going. But it's not that you can't go, it's that you are not meant to go. Not yet. After awakening, your system needs time to adjust. The nervous system, which has been running on survival patterns, begins to slow down. The mind, which has been wired for control and certainty, starts to soften. The body, which has been ignored in the race for achievement, asks to be listened to. Integration is not glamorous. It doesn't look like peak performance. It looks like quiet mornings where nothing gets done. It looks like afternoons filled with unfamiliar emotions rising to the surface. It looks like a deep fatigue that doesn't make sense to the rational mind. But this fatigue is not from doing too little. It's from carrying too much for too long. And now that the truth has broken through, the old ways of moving can no longer continue. They collapse not because you are weak, but because they are no longer aligned with your new state of being. You may feel the urge to force yourself back into action. The voice of the old self will say, get up. Do something, prove you're still valuable. But this voice no longer holds the same authority. Its demands feel heavy now, disconnected. And in this disconnection, you begin to feel the quiet presence of something else, something softer, more honest. A new rhythm, one that moves like breath, not like machinery. One that trusts the process, even when the path is unclear. This rhythm does not rush in. It waits. It allows space for what the intellect cannot grasp during this period of integration. Your job is not to fix yourself. It is to stay with yourself. To allow what is unresolved to rise without judgment. To let the broken pieces fall without trying to catch them. You are not meant to be productive during this phase. You are meant to be present. The mind may resist. It will try to plan, to solve, to create a new goal to chase. But none of those things can replace the sacredness of simply being with what is. You are reorienting your entire way of relating to existence. That cannot be rushed. Eventually, a new energy will begin to emerge. Not from pressure but from alignment. Not from fear but from truth. And that energy will move you not because you are supposed to, but because it is time. Until then, stillness is not stagnation, it is medicine, it is recalibration, it is your system learning to operate from a new place. One that doesn't need permission to rest. One that doesn't need to perform in order to feel worthy. One that knows healing happens in the spaces where nothing appears to be happening at all. When the old motivations fall away, what remains can feel like a terrifying void. The familiar drives that once pushed you forward, ambition, desire, the hunger for recognition, have dissolved, leaving a quiet emptiness that feels like nothingness. This space is not a failure or a breakdown, it is a profound threshold, the pause between who you were and who you are becoming. You stand at the edge of yourself, stripped of illusions, and faced with the question that many fear most: what do I really want? It is here, in this unsettling silence, that authentic desire begins to emerge, but it does so slowly, subtly, and often almost imperceptibly at first. Authentic desire does not resemble the powerful urges you are used to. It doesn't roar or demand attention. It does not rush or push. Instead, it whispers. It shows up in quiet moments, when you pause to breathe deeply, when you notice a sunset without needing to capture it, when a feeling of peace rises without reason. This new desire is not tied to accomplishment or validation. It does not hinge on outcomes or approval. Instead, it arises from a deeper knowing, a resonance that calls you toward what feels true and aligned. It is not something you can manufacture or chase. It is something that reveals itself only when you are still enough to listen. Process of waiting for this authentic desire to emerge can feel agonizing. The ego grows impatient and restless, longing for the old certainties, the familiar fires of motivation. It demands clarity, direction, and goals. But this new desire resists all attempts to be pinned down. It cannot be forced or hurried. It unfolds in its own time, often taking shape in the spaces where you least expect it. Sometimes it appears as a quiet passion for simple things, kind word, a moment of connection, a return to nature. Sometimes it reveals itself as a creative impulse, not for fame or profit but for expression itself. Other times it manifests as a deep yearning to serve, to contribute without expectation. Whatever form it takes, it is always rooted in authenticity, not performance. This new desire is also deeply personal. It cannot be borrowed from others or learned from books. It cannot be measured by societal standards or compared with peers. It arises uniquely in you, reflecting your own soul's unfolding. This can feel isolating because the world around you still prizes the old kinds of motivation, ambition, competition, achievement. But your path is different now. It is quieter, less flashy, but infinitely more powerful in its subtlety. It is a desire that honors your deepest truth and moves irresistibly toward becoming whole. You may find that this authentic desire often asks you to let go of certain things. The need for approval, the craving for certainty, the attachment to outcomes. It invites you to trust the process of becoming, even when the destination is unknown. It teaches patience, presence, and humility. It requires that you cultivate inner listening and discernment, learning to differentiate between the clamor of old wants and the whisper of new calls. This is not easy work. It asks for courage, the courage to face uncertainty, the courage to embrace vulnerability, the courage to walk a path that others might not understand. Yet within this courage lies transformation. The birth of authentic desire signals a new chapter of life, one not driven by external validation or fear, but by alignment and truth. This desire carries a power that is quiet but relentless. It moves you not because you must achieve, but because you must be. It calls you toward a life that is more meaningful, more connected, and more real. And in answering this call, you begin to live not from the ego's agenda, but from the soul's unfolding. As this desire grows, motivation returns, but it is different now. It is not frantic or anxious. It does not burn out quickly. It is steady, grounded, and sustained. It arises from a place of deep connection to yourself and to the world around you. This motivation is not a taskmaster but a companion. It encourages you to move forward with grace, patience, and authenticity. It supports you in creating a life that honors both your inner truth and your outer existence. In time, you come to understand that the void you once feared was actually a sacred space. A fertile ground where the old self dissolved and the new self began to emerge. This space is not emptiness, it is potential. It is the place where true motivation is born, not as a force to drive you relentlessly, but as a gentle, persistent calling that invites you to live fully, deeply, and authentically. So if you find yourself in the thick fog of demotivation after a spiritual awakening, know this: you are not broken, you are being remade. You have stepped off the stage. The mask has fallen, the script has burned, and now you sit in the sacred aftermath, unsure of who you are or where to go. This is not failure, this is the womb of something deeper. Be patient. Let the false fall away. Trust the silence between who you were and who you are becoming. For it is only from the ashes and illusion that the soul can rise, and walk, not with the urgency of ambition, but with the quiet power of truth.